All right, John, welcome back to the Publisher Lab podcast. I am Tyler Bishop, and alongside me is that gentleman that I just referred to as John. That is John Cole.
That is me. I am still called John. I'm still here. Hey, Tyler. We're slick, aren't we? We're super slick.
Yeah, we're super slick. And what I think is really funny about that is you said I'm still called John, which I think actually does bring into question the fact that maybe people wonder if you are a robot because, if you've never been to one of our events or anything like that, they may think, hey, these guys have ties to AI. Maybe John is actually a robot, and I am still John is exactly the type of thing a robot would say.
That sounds like a good name for a book or something, doesn't it? I'm still John. I think AI is taking over. But the good news is, so far at least, the Ezoic system has not yet become self-aware. So it's not going to be taking over. But we are self-aware. I hope we are.
Yeah, I hope so. Sometimes more than others.
That's the funny thing about doing podcasts is that you're having a discussion, and at the moment it's just us two. But when obviously people listen to this, there's another discussion going on, which is people listening to it, and they're probably forming ideas and opinions. So guys, stick with us. We have some good stuff to talk about this week, honestly. So Tyler, what are we going to be talking about, and what are we kicking off with?
What I thought might be kind of interesting was earlier this week, myself and Ohad, who's been on the podcast before, who came to us from Google, we did an interview with Street Fight Mag, which Street Fight Mag is a popular online publisher that does stories mainly on local their subtitle is like we're hyper local, and in this case they were interviewing us about some of the challenges that local publishers have. And so in many cases, local publishers are owned by these large publishing groups that kind of own multiple local publishers. But for the most part, a lot of those things still operate independently. It may be a small town paper that has gone digital, and then anything and everything in between that's kind of local. And what I thought was really interesting were a lot of the challenges that the local publishers have are essentially the same ones as the large publishers on a macro scale. On a micro scale, they're different, right? Because they have far more limited resources. But I thought that, the crux of, kind of starting the conversation could be what everybody's concerned about, and that is the duopoly. And, what do you do in the face of it? And that's something we've been hearing a lot about, right?
Yeah, it is. And just to get that right, the Street Fight Mag, those are journalists who talk about local are things that are important to local news publishers, right?
Yeah, local news.
Okay, and what's similar about that vertical is that they are also in that sort of legacy position, because quite often they're supported by newspaper sales, and they've got therefore all of that history. And when we've talked to bigger publishers, they talk about the difference between legacy or historical sites and what they call a pure play, which are websites that are set up to effectively broadcast news through the website, and not so those guys they're in a very difficult position when they're trying to compete with Google and Facebook, because that duopoly, they have those visitors already. So if you're trying to target local news, whatever it might be, Kansas City Morning Star, is that right? I was having a chancing my arm there, but a local news title, let's say, how do they compete for the same eyeballs that advertisers can get from Google and Facebook?
I think it's you mentioned the fact that whether intentionally or unintentionally, you use the word compete. How do you compete with Facebook and Google? And what's interesting about this whole equation is I think the question that a lot of these publishers are asking are, what do we do with these two large platforms that are, for the future that we can foresee, right? So it's hard to always see things before they're be disrupted. But right now you have these two entities that really dominate this space. And really, for the most part, as a publisher, it's really hard to get on without participating in either of these things, yet they're also a competitor. And I think that's the question: is what is that balance between the competition that I have with them, and then also leveraging them for those eyeballs that we were just talking about.
So some of them are, it's not so much a competition to get those same advertisers, but programmatically, that's actually the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much it costs me to target specifics. I look at this, I guess I'm lucky in some respects that I get to talk to bigger publishers, like The Guardian and Telegraph, and then also the smaller ones. And the thing that I find is that the problems that they have are the same. Bigger publishers, smaller publishers, local press websites and national press websites actually have the same sort of problems. There may be a way, in order to get this differentiation that is required, which is, why should I buy my inventory from this national newspaper or from this local newspaper, rather than just getting that same person whenever they go to Google or Facebook properties, by trying to highlight the difference in their interactions when they're there. I actually don't have an answer for this right now, but that is definitely the way that I would try and tackle that, is to highlight that that loyalty. Those loyalists, they're super loyal, right? I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a local newspaper with good journalism, chances are you're going to support it, or at least be interested enough that it doesn't die out. But do you buy the newspaper? Probably not, right? These days, do people buy newspapers very often? So they are having to reinvent themselves into digital businesses wholeheartedly. And that consolidation is carrying on because people who buy newspapers are literally dying out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were kind of talking to this reporter from Street Fight Mag about, which I think really kind of cements your point here, is that, from a standpoint of thinking about the duopoly in this way, Google and Facebook are going to always have a much greater reach than your website. So whether you're a news publisher, or just a general digital publisher with a web blog or whatever, your reach is never going to be as great as one of those large platforms. Additionally, in many cases, if you're a news publisher, your direct buy ads that you sell are still going to be more expensive, because you're obviously going to sell them at a premium over the cost of Google and Facebook. And so as an advertiser, the reach is greater, the cost is less for those two platforms. So where's the value? And I think the value really comes from those user experiences like you were talking about before. And this is kind of where we're going to go with a lot of this conversation, I think. The user experience really determines a lot, right? So user intent, all these other things. A user coming from Google or Facebook, even though they may be the same user, regardless of that, I think the users that are on your site now behave differently than the user that's searching for something on Google or utilizing Google or Facebook, and it's because their intent is different, right? So somebody that comes to the Paducahville Post, right, and they're browsing through those stories because they're local, has even though it's the same user, will have different intentions than when they're maybe browsing on Facebook and catching up with old pals.
Yeah, and they're in a different mode, and we talked about that last week. I think if you draw a parallel with the way that ads have been sold on TV, is why is one channel better than another channel? Why do you buy this channel versus that channel? Sports versus news, or whatever the movies versus kids. It's trying to get audiences, and a lot of this is going to be cured by the targeting systems. And I'm not talking about TV, I'm talking about digital. Is the targeting that is available now to sort of for retargeting, contextual targeting, is a lot better than it used to be. The marketing has been, the competition in that space has been fantastic. But I do think that the answer is going to be revealed by having a better idea of quality beyond price. Sorry about that.
Yeah, your point was underscored by the fact it was like almost enchanted. Is that what happened there, John?
That's right. That was totally deliberate. too many things open on my computer. But seriously, that's exactly what we want, right? We want real quality to be revealed on each site of the internet. So if you are an expert in a particular field, or you have a newsroom full of fantastic newspaper reporters who are producing excellent investigative journalism or local news at a high standard, that is much better. That quality is better. Now, what are those quality metrics? It can't just be all about, the competition for the price. It's got to be something else. And the way that we're approaching it is this engagement metrics and price together, and how many other ads there are, all that sort of stuff. Do we have the answer right now? No, we don't. But I think that's the way it's got to go. And for those businesses, what have they got to do? They've got to differentiate themselves by getting close to their users, making them loyal, making themselves different, giving really great experiences and good, just an overall package has got to be at the highest possible quality, and that will differentiate them in the long run. Now, that's probably cold comfort right now when they're not paying the bills, but they've got to look long term on this, not short term, because if you go short term,
what's interesting about that point is the strategy that we would probably argue is best for the average, like selling yourself to advertisers now and into the future, is also the same strategy that is ultimately going to aid you the most in terms of programmatic as well. And that is it basically enhancing this idea of the user journey, right? So we talk about it all the time. I feel like we belabor the point, but these user experience metrics, bounce rate, time on top, page views per visit, these are kind of like the starting user experience metrics that are ultimately the most important things to your site right now. Because as things get diluted by the duopoly, that is kind of like your gold coin, right? Is these user experience metrics. Because if those things tank and they go away, then the quality of your quote unquote platform, your website, your outlet goes down considerably with it. And we already know that programmatically, the ads that show on your site, or I guess the overall session revenue that you earn on your site is improved by these enhanced user experience metrics, right? So more page views per visit, time on site, these things can help increase your overall session earnings. And then additionally, those same metrics, those user experience metrics, can be parlayed into showing the quality of your platform to advertisers.
Yeah, and there are other metrics that can be used over time, which I think some of the bigger newspapers are getting on top of, which is trying to get people to subscribe, a small, tiny subscription really on a regular basis in exchange for, benefits. And you look at the business model, Netflix, for example, really good one, small amount of money per month, no ads, lots of content. There could be that sort of, but trying to get people to pay for news, very difficult, extremely difficult actually. But I think it's getting easier, particularly in light of the fact that when people are navigating around the internet, how do you know what's real and what's not? If you can align, good news away from fake news, whatever your definitions of those two things are, that may be a good way to go. Being able to crack that, again, takes a lot of testing, takes a lot of time. It could be a way through. It definitely could be a way through. I've been listening to a few podcasts recently about, this monetization question. How do we go about, getting our CPMs up and all of this, trying to sell your own ads? I think programmatic is definitely unstoppable. I think that the chances of selling enormous numbers of ads directly at a high CPM is going to be tough. So where is the value? Where is the value that could be sought out for the advertisers? Because that's really what they're trying to do, is present a really good quality audience. That's what all of us are trying to do when you're trying to build a good website. Good quality audience, super engaged, the best engagement metrics you can possibly get, and then working on that. So yeah.
No, I think it's interesting, and I think one of the things that I think one of the challenges that the local publishers have, and pretty much all small to medium sized publishers have, that the large publishers maybe don't have to experience to the same degree, is the challenges of the resources to help them stay on top of all this, right? So, you know, Tom, the reporter, asked kind of a pointed question the other day when we were kind of going through some of these things, and it was, you know, these publishers don't have the resources to basically go down a path that's ultimately not going to be fruitful. It could break them, and that means this idea of we're going to really highlight programmatic. We're going to divest ourselves in things like direct sales, and we're going to really rely on technology to help us with the way forward. How do they know what technology to invest in? How do they know what trends are likely to help them? For example, things like header bidding or server-side bidding. Are these things they should pay attention to, or these things that they should ignore? Because this takes resources on their team to implement, and they are not like a Guardian or a Telegraph or a New York Times, where they have literally dozens of people on their team that can help research these things and go through them. So where do they start?
Yeah, and where do you start? It is a hard one. I mean, the way that I would recommend using any of this technology that's out there to try and move you forward is to implement it in such a way that you can see the effect, you can see the results of it, and it's a little bit like trying to change too many things in a multivariate test at the same time. So you don't want to be like turning all of these variables on at the same time. You want to almost get back to basics and then reintroduce technologies to see. So a lot of the big publishers, they use data management platforms, and a data management platform is a way for you to extend your audience across different sections of your site. So sorry if I'm telling people what they already know here, but let's say you've got people in the business section and then you've got people in the sports section. You can show business targeted user ads in the sports section if you know that person is going to both sections. And so it's following the users around. How much does that help you increase your overall revenue? Now, most people do this on a CPM basis because they say, hey, my ad sales guys are out there trying to sell,
business ads in the sports section.
Exactly, business ads. And they say, this is how many business guys we've got. We don't actually have that many page views in this particular section, but let's show those same people. And it's a way for you to try and carry your CPMs across different areas. But how much is that really adding in terms of extra value? And I'm sure it does. I'm sure it absolutely does. But at what quantum? And how can you then unpick that from, let's say, your header bidding effort, when let's say, for example, you attribute the CPM from a direct sales campaign, and if you take off the value of that person who sold the campaign, their commission, how much it costs to keep that desk live, and then have that CPM, that including the costs, compete programmatically. In other words, how much is direct sales helping your programmatic, and the other way around? These legacy businesses where you have large numbers of salespeople selling direct ads either locally or nationally, how do they play into programmatic? And I don't have the answers here. We know that ad position definitely is an indication of quality. I think the overall industry has talked about this a lot in terms of viewability and trying to tie payments to viewability. It's not there yet, but it's certainly going that way. The ad agencies are saying that they only want to pay for viewable ads. But where are the other ads on the page? There are lots more questions in this quality debate. So without wanting to kind of labor the point too much, Tyler, I feel like when you are trying to splice and dice value and give it out to advertisers so that advertisers can bid on it fairly, you need to have a level playing field for all advertisers, and in exactly the same way, you need to have a level playing field within your site so that you can reveal the values of different sections and different users. And it's a multifaceted problem, and it's not one that you can get by just cooking people and following them around. So people might spend a lot of money on, let's say, for example, the data management platform, or a header bidding solution, or a server-to-server bidding solution, but all of these things have to be looked at holistically to know if they're helping. And a lot of people are finding it very difficult to unpick all of that, how much each of those different pieces of tech helping. So I really don't want to confuse our listeners. I really don't. But I empathize with those people who are trying to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading this interview with someone that was an executive at a very large publisher. They were anonymized for the sake of this interview, but they were talking about this idea of following people around with cookies as a means of basically like this advanced form of tracking. And the guy said, there's certain things in the industry that people want to ignore because it's convenient for them to ignore. And one of the things was, he said that he brought up once, he goes, what happens when people simply just delete their cookies? And he said it was if somebody farted in an elevator, the way that people looked at him. He said just this complete look of disgust and disdain. And it's because, there are a lot of these clever ideas that come into fruition, but they work out better on paper than they do reality sometimes. And that's why testing is so important. I don't know how much time we have to really get into some of this, but one of the things that's really important with testing, like you said, was, the multiple variables, not changing too much, being able to look at the results, but making sure that you have a measurement system that you can actually go back on. And when you make changes, you can say, okay, how did this perform against the baseline? And am I using the exact same type of measurements? I just wrote a piece on blog.azoic.com on website usability testing. It's really interesting. It's a completely different concept, but it talked about the idea of using heat maps where you get data, right? But it's really hard to make a objective observation of that data and then make a change that you can measure using the same thing you measured with the first time. So you heat map a website, you look at how things worked, and then you say, well, I think they're clicking here. I'm going to move things around because I think things will work better this way. And then you throw another heat map on it, and obviously things have changed. Well, how do you measure that change? The map is different. People clicked where you thought they should have clicked, but is that better? Is that not better? How do you really measure that? And so you can get objective data, but you're still getting a subjective opinion versus you change a button and you look at the user experience metrics, page views per visit, time on site, those kinds of things, and then you make the button something else, and then you test the same things. You can objectively see, did my user experience metrics, time on site, page views per visit, do better with button A or button B? And those kinds of tests are the ones that you want to be conducting. It's just an interesting concept, but I think ultimately it all comes back to being able to test these new forms of technology, changes to your web properties. All these things are linked together with the same basic principles, I think.
Yes, absolutely right. And we haven't got much time now. I think we're going to have to finish. But when I was reading some of these opinion pieces of when people talk about, well, this is better than that because we heard back, we had some feedback from our visitors. Another really good example, we did a short survey. So that data is skewed to include only people who do surveys, right? You're not getting your regular visitors. You're only getting one type of person, which are the people who fill out surveys. It may help you in the same way that a heat map might help you, but it is not going to be durable across your entire audience. The only way that you can get that is by testing to your entire audience and making, if you're not doing all of them, then you're doing a random sample. But we better finish up now, Tyler. We've definitely run out of time. But let's talk some more about data. I certainly would love to talk maybe next time about the whole issue of your data as a website owner and how you can use it and the benefits and pitfalls, I think, of data management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that our friend Ohad is at the Google AMP conference this week. And so
Yes.
there's a lot of goings on happening there. So maybe we'll bring him back on as a guest and he can tell us a little bit about the latest on digital publishing and AMP.
Yeah, let's do AMP next time. That sounds like a really good conference. I've been hearing from him this week about that. So plenty to discuss. Okay, guys, thanks for listening this time. Don't forget to do all that liking of us. We need those stars. And thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and please, iTunes reviews would be great. So we really appreciate every single one of them. Thank you guys very much, and we'll catch you next time.